Now, this next story is a doozy, and it involves AT Games and Bandai Namco and the popular arcade game from the 80s, Ms. Pacman. Now, if you're not familiar with AT Games, they make these plug-and-play consoles. They are generally pretty crappy, but they sell at high volume because AT Games is very good at marketing this stuff. They get them into just about every retailer you can imagine, even like convenience stores and drugstores. They're not all that expensive, and because they license all of this original software, they can use all the logos and all the other things that people might remember from the 80s, and this really pushes volume for them. They're very good at marketing, not so good at the hardware that's inside the box that they're marketing. And it looks like they've developed some ill will with Bandai Namco over the years. A most recent issue with them was that Bandai licensed a bunch of games, including Pacman, to AT Games to make a little plug-and-play device. I think it was called the Blast. And this was like a little USB or HDMI stick that you'd plug into the side of your TV, and you could play a bunch of arcade titles on there that AT Games licensed from all of the rights holders to those games. And of course, they've put all the IP all over the box and everything. John Hancock, another YouTuber, got one of the review units in, and he loved it because they had the actual arcade ROMs on it. And I was looking at this thinking, wow, that's a pretty cool little device for such a low price to have arcade ROMs that seem to work pretty nicely on it. But as it turns out, AT Games was not actually selling the device with arcade ROMs on it. They had sent those out to reviewers, but the actual devices that they were selling to consumers were running NES ROMs, certainly a subpar port of the arcade originals. And of course, John Hancock didn't know that when he reviewed the item, and when people started buying them and seeing that they were getting something very different, it obviously created an issue for Bandai because they look bad because their IP is plastered all over the box. And it looks like they wanted to kind of cut off some future licensing with AT Games as a result of that tarnishment there. So they denied AT Games the ability to use the Ms. Pacman license for upcoming products that they wanted to put together. But AT Games was still going around to retailers telling them that they were going to have a Ms. Pacman product coming out, and they were basically selling it as something that they were going to have, even though Bandai was not giving them the right to use the license. But there's a little bit of a twist with Ms. Pacman, because apparently Ms. Pacman is the melding of the original Pacman code along with some code that was developed by a group of MIT students, and they eventually formed a company called, I believe, GCC. And this company, even though they didn't write all of the game, were given a royalty on the sale of the game that looks like was a perpetual kind of royalty. So even anything Ms. Pacman you buy today using that code is going to the remnants of this old company, which is now defunct, but there are still rights holders getting a portion of the revenue from the sale of that arcade game. And guess what? AT Games went out and bought the rights to that old company, so now they're receiving royalties from Bandai every time some kind of Ms. Pacman arcade game with that code is sold somewhere. And I think that is driving the lawsuit here. So this is going to get crazy, and we'll have to see how it all turns out. But if you read the lawsuit, Bandai is throwing a book at them. They're going after them on false advertising over the issues with that Blast plug and play and a whole host of other issues. You can read more at the article that you see on screen there. And I'm also going to point you at my pick of the week this week, which is Mad Little Pixel. He's been covering this story in depth. He's got a whole video on the lawsuit. He paid for the actual document and goes through the whole thing on his channel. And he's also covering all the other things happening now with the GCC licensing and all that stuff as well. So it's definitely worth checking out this week. It's going to get crazy. And there's a lot on the line here because I don't think AT Games can really afford to absorb losing the suit that Bandai is bringing against them. So this is some high-stakes stuff here, and I think it might impact what we see on shelves this holiday season. Stay tuned and strap in, because this one's going to get a bit crazy, I think.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold-level supporters, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Chris Allegretta, Tom Albrecht, Mike Talbert, Brian Parker, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/S.